Hi, everyone. I'm Greg McGruder, the Director of Global Special Events for National Geographic, and thank you for joining us. Joining me today are the stellar team for Explore, The Last Tepui. Director Taylor Rees, Nat Geo photographer and director Renan Ozturk, world-class climber Alex Honnold, climber and Nat Geo explorer Mark Synnott, and Nat Geo explorer and biologist Bruce Means. So my first question is for Bruce. And, I guess most people have never heard of a tepui. Would you say that, Bruce, outside of the scientific world?
Absolutely correct. Even people in the scientific world don't know much about those places. They're actually mesas, high, flat mountaintops, the largest accumulation of them and probably the tallest of them in the world.
So tell me why it was important for you to scale one and then document the wildlife on this amazing life form.
Mark Synnott and I have been exploring the river system that drops off of famous Mount Roraima. It's called the Piqua River. Next door to it is the sister tepui called Waiasapu. Roraima has been climbed quite a lot. Mark has climbed it at least twice, but no one had climbed Waiasapu. And on the expeditions that Mark led previously, I had been a biologist and had done lots of field work on the interesting organisms found along the transect up to Mount Roraima. To complete the survey of the amphibians and reptiles of the Piqua River Basin, I needed to go up the transect to Mount Waiasapu's summit. And who better to lead me than Mark?
So, Bruce, clearly your initial plan was to reach the top of the Tepui to gather these specimens. But what went through your mind when it became apparent that this was not going to happen?
Well, I was frustrated, and I was almost decided to say to heck with what everybody thinks. I'm going to do it anyway. However, any injury that I might have incurred would have set the entire expedition at risk, grave risk, let alone my own life, which I guess I could have expended for that experience. So I yielded to the advice of the doctor and of the climbers to go only to the penultimate camp before reaching the base of the wall of the cliff. And of course, they agreed to substitute for me to do a survey of what was on the wall and on the summit.
So Bruce, clearly you had a lot of people who were loving you on this expedition, looking out for your well-being. And I think the filmmakers, Taylor and Renan, you did a remarkable job of demonstrating the collaboration and documenting the collaboration, the teamwork that is so important on this kind of climb. But Bruce, one other question. You talked about the importance of biodiversity throughout the film. Can you explain why this is such an important element?
Yes, we can't live alone on this planet. And if you don't understand that, then look into Biosphere 1 and Biosphere 2 and other attempts humans have made to survive in a sustaining environment that is very large, many acres in size, full of water and plants and things to try to sustain people. Well, at what level of species on this planet can we survive as we're causing the extinction of great many of them? Biodiversity is hugely important. Animals and plants bring us food, they give us clothing, they give us medicines. We need our fellow creatures on this planet. We arrived here as an evolutionary biologist over the same long time and through the same perils as all other plants and animals. In fact, genetically, we're connected to an ancestor with every other creature on the planet. So everything else on this planet deserves the same rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as we do. It's okay for us to utilize them, but not to their extinction, because in my opinion, as we cause vast extinctions on the planet, it's going to feed back negatively on us, just like carbon dioxide loading in the atmosphere is doing right now.
So Bruce, spoken with eloquence and passion. So my next question is for you, Mark. You were the leader of this expedition. Tell us how this project came about, how long it lasted, and how you went about creating this team.
Thanks, Greg. You know, as Bruce mentioned, our relationship goes back more than 20 years now. I guess it was probably around the year 2001. And I was hovering around National Geographic, hoping to meet a scientist who might be looking to do a collaboration with a climber. And I had learned about the Tepuis in an article in National Geographic, which I think was the last Tepui article, which was in 1989. And it really inspired me. And someone there made this connection between the two of us. And I need to find out who that was and thank them, because Bruce has been such an inspiration to me over all these years, over the past 2 decades. And the trips that we have done together have kind of changed the course of my career and my life. And he just taught me that there's things out there that are more important than me going out and doing another first ascent. The second trip that Bruce and I did, or no, sorry, it was like the third or fourth trip in 2012, when we went into the sinkhole on Mount Waiasipu. That was the first expedition that I had ever done where there was no climbing. I wasn't climbing anything. All I was doing was trying to get Bruce into this hole. And I remember at the end of the trip thinking to myself, that is the coolest trip that I've ever done, and the most meaningful and the most special to me, and I didn't climb anything. And that really kind of changed my perspective on things. And ever since, Bruce and I have been scheming. Every time we pitched one of these trips to National Geographic, we pitched it as his swan song. And we've done it 4 times now. And this one, I thought that it really was his swan song, but now he was just saying when we were like off camera that it's not, and that he wants to go back again, which is crazy. But so for the seemingly our last one, we just wanted to make it the most ambitious, where we would combine all the elements of the different trips that we had done before. And, you know, Bruce is talking about how I'm the perfect guy to organize it, but I felt like I needed to have, you know, some secret weapons to make sure that we made it up the cliff. So the first person that I called was Alex Honnold. And luckily, you know, I've got an old connection with this guy. And I was honestly a little bit surprised when he called me back. I made the pitch and he was like, okay, I don't know. And then he called me back, and he basically just cut right to the chase, and he said, I'm in. That was awesome. And we were all, you know, so excited when we knew that Alex was going to be on board. But we also wanted to have a Tepui specialist. And there's a guy from Venezuela named Federico Pisani, whose nickname is Fuco.
Who we saw in the film, right?
Yeah, and Fuco, everybody here can attest. He's a very special man, and he's just a sterling individual, and he's got a really strong background with the science and biology, and he's been climbing on the Tepuis for 27 years. So I don't think there's anyone out there that has more experience specific to Tepuis, who also really has this deep understanding of the flora and fauna. So those were the ringers, Fuco and Alex, and we have, you know, Bruce as the scientist and me as the, I guess, the organizer and someone trying to make sure that the wheels don't come off the bus. And then, of course, Taylor and Renan and their team. And we, you know, all of us have worked together a bunch in the past. And so there was a real solidarity. And that's such an important thing on these expeditions, because it's where you find the fun.
And my next question is for Taylor and Renan, because I agree with you, Mark, this was a special film, but it was special because I think Taylor and Renan did such a remarkable job of capturing the full range of human emotions, adventure, and exploration. So, but let's talk about filming this expedition and the story arc. So the initial plan was for Bruce to reach the top of the Tepui. So what happened behind the scenes when you had to change that narrative? And is that something you were prepared for?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly not the intention to have that situation happen. There were a lot of really difficult conversations with the doctor and just everyone involved as to what was going to be the best call. But luckily, we had a really amazing film crew that could adapt and kind of come up with an alternative solution. And we essentially broke into two teams. So I got to stay with Bruce and be there for the discovery of many new species of frogs. And it was just a big wild jungle camp full of critters. And Renan and Matt went up with the climbers. And we were able to stay in communication with radios, which we're really lucky to have. So we kind of just filmed everything that was happening in the two different camps, and stayed in touch. So it was
Yeah, that was remarkable how you pivoted and captured some of those magic moments. But Renan, you're a skilled climber yourself. Can you talk about the challenges that you faced on this particular assignment?
Yeah, I think when you think of a normal climbing expedition, it becomes pretty easy to film when it's in the mountains and things are sterile and everything's controlled. But this was a totally different type of situation where you've got to get all of this equipment through the extremely wet jungle, and we really had no idea how to survive in a place like that. And we really relied on the Akawayu porters who are moving with us. I think they're featured a little bit in the film, but they deserve even more credit for helping us build our shelters and just helping us survive on a daily basis, because it was just really one of the more challenging environments to climb and film in. And really the only dry place was the most overhanging places on the wall. And even then, these giant sea of cloud banks of moisture would come and hit us every day. So yeah, the challenges were many and something that we had never experienced before.
So Alex, you have climbed some of the most legendary peaks in the world, but this climb was different from most of the other climbs because of the strong conservation element. So Mark talked about asking you to go on this climb. Why did you agree so readily? Or did you agree readily? Did you have to think about this? What made you decide to take on the assignment?
Yeah, tepuis are one of the unique geological features of the world, so it's an incredible climbing opportunity. And I had never been to a tepui, but many of my friends had. I'd heard about the rock quality. I knew that it was an exceptional climbing opportunity. And then the fact that a trip like this was also in service of conservation and supporting Bruce's work was just made it irresistible. I was like, an expedition to go do some great climbing with a good team to do something that's even more useful than a normal climbing trip. Like that's perfect to me. So I mean, I couldn't say no to that.
Alex, there's this one element in the film, scene in the film that Renan and Taylor captured that I thought was so telling about mountain climbers. So, I've presented a lot of mountain climbers at National Geographic, and one thing they always do in the green room before they go on stage is reach up above the door and start doing chin-ups. And I noticed at one point you had kind of created this chin-up bar. And I guess the question everybody's like, why is that? I know you've got to build that strength up and keep it, but I thought that was a remarkable moment that was captured.
Well, part of that's because on an expedition like this, it took us so long to get to the wall. I mean, there's such a long trek through the jungle, and then there's so much time spent, in camp and like managing with, it's just basically incredibly complicated to get to the climb. And so in order to maintain some climbing fitness along the way, you have to train as you go. And actually, that was one of the beautiful things about having Fuko with us, our other team member, is that he's actually one of the trainers for the Venezuelan national climbing team. And so he was very committed to training. And so all of us basically trained together for the whole hike in and out of the Tepuis. And actually, as it turns out, when I came home from the expedition, I was basically in the same kind of shape as when I had left, which means that, you know, we had done a good job along the way.
So Bruce, this next question is for you. Even though you didn't make it to the top of the Tepui, you appear to have made peace with being a happy camper down below. You know, you clearly did, and I think Taylor and Renan and the film team did a wonderful job of capturing those moments, those reflective moments. So I understand that during this expedition, there were about, I mean, your goal was to find some discoveries, and there were a number of specimens that you collected, new species that you know, how many do you think you found? How many new species do you think you found? And I understand they're being peer reviewed now.
One has to do DNA studies to really nail down what you have. And so I collaborate with a colleague in Europe, and he has looked at the specimens that we've collected, and it appears that we have at least 3 frogs, at least 1 lizard, and interestingly, very possibly 1 snake, new to science from our expedition. This makes me ecstatic because what I enjoy is I'm a naturalist, and I like to go out into nature and experience nature. But more than that, I like to contribute to the human knowledge base about nature so that we can use that knowledge to conserve those environments that I love so much. So by finding the new species that we did on this trip and adding to the collective biota of that river basin, we have a good opportunity to argue that that area ought to be conserved, maybe made into a national park. It has spectacular physical properties, but we now know from all the times that Mark and I have been there, and now our expedition, that it has fantastic biological qualities as well. And all those go together into making a really great national park, which has not been done yet in that part of Guyana. And we have our fingers crossed that what we did will kind of help stimulate the Guyanese to recognize how important on a global basis their tepuis are.
And I'm going to go back to Renan and to Taylor and just the whole process of filming this. And as I was watching the film, I had forgotten that it was being captured by filmmakers. And I guess that's the art of good filmmaking. You just kind of figure, okay, it just happens. Some higher power has done this, but clearly, you know, Renan, what was it like trying to climb and film and also filming on top of that Tepui? I mean, getting there for one thing, through that, you know, grueling trek, and then on top with all the weather conditions changes. Can you talk about those challenges a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a challenge trying to keep up with Alex and Mark, climbing at those kind of high standards. And I think technology has helped a lot. As it got smaller, you're able to do more. And I think we pushed our gear to the limit. But yeah, it's just kind of fun seeing what you can capture, and the excitement of the discovery and the looking for the frogs like keeps you going. There are moments when we were like going through the middle of the night, hypothermic with Foucault, looking for the frogs, and almost like falling off the cliff, like dangling off little like spine-ridden pieces of grass, with Foucault screaming, no, don't fall, and things like that, which, as scary as it is, sometimes like those little bits of adrenaline like keep you going. Yeah, it's just ultimately you feel privileged to be in those positions in the first place, and it makes you just like continue to work harder, especially when there's a greater goal than just the climbing, and you're also feeding off of Bruce's energy, which is so like full of excitement and youth.
Can I add one little quickie?
Yes, go ahead, Bruce.
Renan's masterful use of drone photography is what absolutely blows my mind. Some of the most beautiful images and scenics from the drone, especially like where he begins showing Mark and Alex and Foucault on the cliff, and he backs away and goes so far into the sky that they disappear completely. I mean, that is some of the most breathtaking, beautiful photographic artistry I have ever seen. And I hope the audience will feel the same way.
So Renan, you've done a lot of remarkable climbs, even climbing Mount Everest. How did this project compare to Mount Everest?
Yeah, I was sort of alluding to it earlier, but from the filmmaking standpoint, this project was a lot harder than Everest, because when you're climbing in the mountains, everything is cold and crisp and sterile. And in the jungle environment, everything is always wet. And that's pretty much the worst case scenario for electronics. We had mold growing inside of our lenses. Every time you want to get a shot, half the time you're denied because there's fog on the outside of your lens, on the inside of your lens, or the interior part of it. And then all of our normal ways we know how to exist in the mountains gets thrown out the window, and you can't even sleep in tents. You're in hammock structures built by our Akawayu porters that are all strung together into a structure where one person rolls over, like you feel it throughout the entire set of hammocks that's all strung together, essentially. So sleep becomes an issue over the course of the expedition. And yeah, the challenges go on and on. So for us, it was definitely something that was like the most challenging environments we've ever dealt with from a filming standpoint.
And Mark, for you, comparing this climb to some of your other climbs like Mount Everest or some other mountains that you've scaled.
Well, I think Renan hit the nail on the head in terms of, the primary difficulty in the jungle is wetness and mud. The primary difficulty on Everest in the Himalayas, struggle to breathe in cold. I think I'd take thin air and cold any day over what we called mud world. That's like a special kind of perseverance that you have to be covered in mud and soaking wet all day with no real escape. There were individual days on Everest that were harder than any individual day on this expedition, but big picture, yeah, it did feel like a harder effort. One of the ways that I know when I'm on a really rough trip is that I feel the need to make a calendar so that I can see how much longer I have to suffer for. And then each day it's like a little kid with their advent calendar, getting towards Christmas, and you cross it off and you're like, hey, it's cool. Like, this is amazing, but okay, only like 7 more days and like I could get out of here. And I did that on this expedition. I don't think I did that on Everest.
I'll just add, it's like, when you're filming, I'm pretty bad about this. So you don't pay attention to your surroundings sometimes, and you have to have people watching out for you. And, when you're on Everest, you're like clipped into a rope half the time. There's not much that can go wrong rather than a catastrophic avalanche. But in the jungle, you take one wrong step on a slippery rock and you go down. There's a couple times where I face planted like fully into water with my camera on me. The camera submerged, like covered in mud head to toe, and all the team members just had to like hold their breath, try not to laugh. And we were just like really lucky that the cameras survived in some of those situations. It happened on the boat ride too, fully dropped the camera into the water without the housing. So yeah, and you don't have unlimited resources. You can't just call the camera house and be like, I broke this camera, and it's high stakes.
So Taylor, are there going to be outtakes, a blooper reel of this, or Taylor and Renan?
The blooper reel would just be Renan hurting himself over and over.
What I like about this is it showcases a little bit a curmudgeon. You know, everything on TV now is young and youthful, and these young people in their 20s and 30s. Well, now we got an old man trying to slug along doing something. Well, I like that a lot, and I hope the viewers will too.
Well, I would say, Bruce, you didn't present as a curmudgeon. And if you did, it's a curmudgeon with hope. All right. So again, Taylor and Renan, this was a wonderful film. And, you know, I think the other thing, it just, the film had such a wonderful spirit about it. It was just so infectious, and all of you contributed to making it that way. And I think it just showed the power of teamwork as well in a remarkable way. So I've got one last question, and I would like all of you to answer this question. And it's this. To me, it seemed like every aspect of this film, whether you're a filmmaker, a climber, or a scientist, from all those different disciplines, offered some life lessons for us all. So I'm hoping that each of you can share one thing from this project that you hope viewers might embrace. Let's start with Renan.
Yeah, I would just say it just made me realize like the beauty and the unexpected, like watching Bruce collapse in a small pool of water where he pulls up a single rock and he's like, there's an infinite amount of life in this tiny pool under this tiny rock. And I think if we all embrace life like that on a daily basis, it'll make the world a better place.
I think it can be difficult for people to think, you know, why does this jungle in remote Guyana matter to me? But, you know, what we've really learned from COVID as well is that it's going to take everyone from all over the planet to all be protecting their forests and their jungles and their mountains and their ecosystems for this entire planet as a whole to thrive. And so to be there and to see the work that Bruce was doing, that the work that all of the villages who have community conservation organizations are doing to protect this one place just inspired me to know it benefits the planet as a whole.
Okay, so let's have Mark answer that question.
Well, all the same stuff that these guys are talking about, protecting the Pikewa, documenting its biodiversity so that people will understand how important it is and that moves can be made to conserve it. Of course, that was, right at the heart of this thing and all these trips that we've been doing. But something that I want to make sure that people don't overlook is the individual who sits right at the heart of that, which is Bruce Means. And so a really important thing for me here was that I wanted to tell Bruce's story. And I always have, and way back in those days, 20 years ago, when I was hovering around in the halls of National Geographic, this was the story that I wanted to tell. It's the story of the Pikewa, but it's also the story of the man who's dedicated a significant portion of his life to protecting it and raising awareness of it. So that's one of the most important things. I think it's a given that people are going to appreciate that, but Bruce is such a unique and special person, and I want people to know about that.
Alex, how about you? What would you like people to take away from this film?
Well, I think one of my takeaways from the film was just a reminder to stay open to new experiences, because I think I went there as a climber, but wound up learning more about biology and more about geology than I have on any previous trip. And so it's just a good reminder that no matter what your personal passions are, you should always be ready to learn new things and ready to learn about the world around you.
And Bruce?
The most important thing that we hopefully are able to do with this beautiful documentary is to stimulate more appreciation of nature, no matter where you are on the planet, whether it's in the Arctic or on mountains, valleys, jungles, whatever. Nature is spectacular, and we have very few opportunities now among young people to appreciate nature. We don't grow up on farms any longer where we learn how important it is, the agricultural activities that feed us. Most people are, at least in advanced countries, better, wealthier countries, are confined to urban and suburban environments. So the last few vanishing places on this planet, like where we were, which was relatively pristine, are the laboratories in which animals and plants evolved and to which they're best adapted. So they are the only places left before they're completely gone where we can learn about true nature, true ecology, and how important the environment really is to us. If we lose those laboratories that nature created originally, then all we're studying are man-made environments that are far less important on an ecological scale than the original environments that we hope we showcased. And if people come away thinking, oh, golly, how cool that was, or this rock scene, or the mountain climbing scene, or the vegetation on the cliff, I mean, all of that, I hope, inspires the viewers to want to appreciate nature more than we now do generally.
Yes. And so Renan and Taylor, it was truly some magical filmmaking. And I want to thank you two and the rest of the team, Alex, Mark, and also Bruce, for being here today to talk about the film. And so this program, Explore the Last Tepui, National Geographic Disney Plus's original, will be available to stream exclusively on Disney Plus starting on Earth Day, April 22nd. Thank you all.
Yay. Thank you.